Welcome to Retirement Rescue Radio, a show specifically designed to help retirees and pre-retirees maximize their financial efficiency so you can live the retirement lifestyle you've always imagined. Your host is Nate Miller, investment advisor representative and author of the CPR Retirement Rescue Roadmap. Nate discusses thoughts and ideas from some of today's most knowledgeable professionals in the field of finance. He offers strategies along the way to help you make better financial decisions so you can maximize your retirement. This is Retirement Rescue Radio.
All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of Retirement Rescue Radio. I'm your host, Nate Miller, and today we're going to tackle something. We are going to talk about the debt ceiling, right? The federal debt ceiling. Are we going to default? Are the market's going to crash? What's going to happen, right? And I wanted to do a quick recording about that because it's a topic that's probably going to be on our news feeds literally for about the next 6 months or so, because I don't think they're going to reach a resolution until the final hour, unfortunately, because that's kind of what seems to happen, right? In the past, that's also what kind of happens, right? The shutting down of the government, flirting with the national debt default is becoming a political bargaining chip that both sides of the aisle are using very liberally. And, I've gotten messages and phone calls where people are concerned about it. And they're wondering, like, is this going to lend itself to another financial meltdown? Is it going to be a financial catastrophe? And hopefully I can be the voice of reason here right now because I want to give you guys a little bit of peace of mind. This is honestly very, very low on my list of things to be concerned about this year, at least economically, right? I would be more concerned about the housing market getting cut off the knees because of the rates increasing. Be more concerned about people losing their job. I do think the unemployment rate is going to go up. Jobs and real estate, in my opinion, have a bigger impact on the stock market and the overall economy than the politicians politicking around the national debt ceiling and whether or not we need to increase that. I'd also be a little bit more cognizant of what interest rates are doing, inflation, the war over in Russia and Ukraine. Those things, in my opinion, have a lot more to do with what could possibly go on than the debt ceiling, right? And so I want to give you some facts, all right? And let me hit the button here and share my screen. So if you haven't been here, the Treasury.gov's website actually it's a pretty good looking website, kind of articulates the problems that we're facing right now. And so the biggest problem is right there. You see that at the very, very top. We've got $31 trillion of debt, a little more than that, right? And most of you, maybe you know my politics, maybe you don't, right? But the problem is this is not going to be a left wing or right wing type of a conversation, right? Because this has been at the helm and at the hands of people who consider themselves staunch conservatives and people who look at themselves as more progressive liberals. Both sides of the aisle are to blame for a national debt of $31 trillion plus, right? And of course, we've already actually hit the debt ceiling theoretically, but what the Federal Reserve is telling us is that we can basically move and shift money around the balance sheet. Where we really are going to run into issues is actually sometime in June. And at that point in time, economists are saying that we're not going to have enough money to pay people who own our debt. So that's the issue, right? And so if anyone needs a little help in explaining how you get into debt, the Federal Reserve is going to help you explain. So here, watch this. The national debt explained, right? Simply put, it's similar to a person using a credit card. If you don't pay off the full balance every month, you've got $400 in revenue, you spent $500, so you got a $100 deficit. Well, the next year, if you have $600 of revenue and $800 of spending, you now have a $200 deficit. So that means you've got $300 total dollars in debt, right? So very, very simple. So if you have more expenses than you have revenue, you have to borrow money to sustain it. Like, we should have all learned that in like economics 101, or maybe not even economics 101, maybe in grammar school or high school, something like that, right? It's like, even my son knows that he can't afford any new Minecraft Legos unless he has money to buy them, unless of course it's his birthday or Christmas or something like that. But if he wants something in the middle of the year, he has to have the money for it. He's not going into debt for it. So like, the government, I feel, is spending money worse than children at this point. So what this shows, let me go down a little bit more here. This kind of shows the trajectory. Look at that. Oh my gosh. the trajectory of our national debt going all the way back to 1921. And you can see that it spiked a little bit here, right, during World War II, at this part right there. And then, we had pretty much decades upon decades of pretty much level debt. We didn't spend money that we didn't have up until about the mid, 80s, right? Kind of right around here is where you see it really start to jump up. It just shoots up, right? And so think of the different political heads, right? Everybody wants to blame the president for everything, but there are a lot of other butts in the seats in Washington that you can blame as well. But if you do want to blame one person, president's an easy target. And during this time, you had Reagan, you had George Bush, you had Bill Clinton, you had George W. Bush, you had Obama, you got Trump, and now you got Biden, right? Every single one of these darn presidents were at the helm during this massive spike in our federal debt. It's like literally in 1982, which is a couple years after I was born. Right, I'm aging myself there real quick. So I know I've got a baby face. I don't look like I'm almost 43 at the time of this recording, but I am bald. So, that does age me a little bit as well, too. Anyway, that all being said, we were at $3 trillion of total debt. And then it just spiked up all the way to where we're at now at roughly about $31 trillion. And so what really matters is the percentage of GDP. Right. And so this has been the debate forever. And it was a real stressor at the end of World War II. So you got war heroes selling war bonds, going door to door to raise more capital to finance the war. And back at the end of World War II, our federal debt represented close to about 100%. So there we go, right here. So that's what this chart here is showing. Back then, it represented almost 100%, sitting there at like 96%, 1948. And so that's where we were at that time, almost 100% of our gross domestic product. Sorry. When we had times of peace, like we had during the last several decades, we started paying the debt off, and it represented a smaller percentage of our GDP. So the low right here in like 1981-ish, right, 32%. So we're at 32 now. When the government just started spending really stupid money, in my opinion. So 32%. And so let's give you a case in point. Let's say you got a household income of $100,000 and your mortgage is $32,000. You owe $32,000, but your household income is $100,000, right? So it's not bad. So if you looked at it as a consumer, I'd say that's pretty small, right? It's a pretty small amount of debt. It's easily manageable. Fast forward today, where our federal debt is like 125% of our GDP. And that would be more like now we owe $125,000 on our mortgage and our household income is $100,000 still. And here's why I'm less concerned. When all the talking heads out there are crying that we're going to default on our debt, it's like the financial crisis on steroids or the Great Depression, whatever. And all our money in the banks is not going to be safe. That's what they're all saying. Well, you know what? As far as the media is concerned, fear sells. Fear sells. And a good portion of our federal debt is owned by what they call intergovernmentally. So here we go, right here. This is what this is going to show, intergovernmentally. And what does that mean? Well, that's the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve owns close to $7 trillion of our bonds. That's this what you're seeing right here, the 6.87, owns nearly $7 trillion of our bonds. Now, these debts are held by the public, right? These other ones right here, the public. And so your mom and pop consumers, mutual funds, insurance companies, and other nations. A lot of people think that China owns all of our debt. Actually, Japan actually owns more than our debt than China does. And China has actually stopped buying our debt, but China is one of the nations that owns a large portion of our debt. But the 24 trillion held by the mom and pop investors, banks, financial institutions, and other countries and stuff like that. But that 7 trillion, which is about 20% of our federal debt, it's essentially like taking money out of our right pocket and putting into the left pocket, because that's really what money printing is. When the Federal Reserve enters the government auction and starts buying up debt, basically our government owns 20% of our debt. So naturally, if we run up to the debt ceiling, at that point, who are we going to stop paying money to, right? We want to, the final hour, it's like, where's our money going to go? Who are we going to pay? And in 2011, we had this very same issue happen. And they already had laid the groundwork for how they prioritize who gets paid and who doesn't get paid, right? And so guess who the government is not going to pay interest to if something like that happens? They're not going to pay interest to themselves. Right. And life will go on. So when 20% of the federal deficit doesn't need to be paid on, and the other 80% will be continued to be paid on like clockwork, that actually enables us to kick the can down the road substantially longer. I don't know the exact number, but it might be like a year or two or something like that. So the idea that in June that we're not going to have enough money to pay our debt is just fear mongering. Right. And unfortunately, I don't think that we should flirt with this. We shouldn't. Right. I don't think that this should be a political pawn in the name of, negotiations or whatever. And I do understand what Republicans are saying. The Republicans are saying, hey, we're running up on the debt ceiling again. This is a great opportunity for us to look at the budget. Great opportunity for us to try to reach some kind of a deal. And then we've got Joe Biden that's saying, no, I'm not negotiating. You just raise the federal debt ceiling because that's just what we do as Americans. We raise it. We don't use it as a negotiation tool. And I actually think it's never a bad time to look at our budget. Never. Especially when you look at the percentage of our GDP that the deficit currently represents. Ultimately, what needs to happen if we want to stop flirting with the debt ceiling that we keep raising and raising and raising no matter what, is we need to have some more severe measures put into place in Washington. And there's been no willingness on the left or the right to make those difficult decisions because, severity and self-discipline stink. They don't want to do it. Anyone who paid off their credit card or paid their mortgage off or put their kids through college recognizes that you need to start prioritizing your needs and your wants. So right now, what Biden's doing, his take is to not negotiate and just to raise the debt ceiling because we don't flirt with economic disaster. And then we got Kevin McCarthy saying, no, we want to negotiate. And so I don't think that we should flirt with it. We already had the rails laid out on how to prioritize who gets paid and who doesn't, right? And naturally, we'll just pay the mom and pop consumers and banks and insurance companies and mutual fund holders and international bond holders rather than the Federal Reserve. And so let's see here. We got anything else going on this thing here? Yeah, okay, here we go. So the average interest rate on that $31 trillion is only about 2%, right? 2.07. That's kind of where we're sitting at right now. However, 2% of $31 trillion is like taking every dollar that you pay in taxes, and let's take about 25% of that dollar is going to go towards just debt service at that point. So it's crazy. So anyway, I'm not too worried about it. Let's see what else we've got going on here. Oh, look at this. We got a couple quotes. Ben Franklin, he has said, I would rather go to bed without dinner than to rise in debt. That's probably one of the most interesting quotes I've seen on a government website, when above that, we're looking at a $31 trillion debt level. They're obviously not paying a whole lot of attention to Ben Franklin's quote. Maybe they're paying more attention to Alexander Hamilton there, who, of course, was responsible for creating the Federal Reserve System and enabling all the nations to come together in order to improve our credit rating and such and all that kind of stuff, right? And he says the necessity for borrowing, in particular emergencies, cannot be doubted. So on the other, it is equally evident that to be able to borrow upon good terms, it is essential that the credit of the nation should be well established. So then a bunch of deficit spending. Awesome. So, I think that's about it. I think we're reaching the bottom of the page, there. So that's it. Thanks for tuning in, guys. If you have any questions, definitely reach out to us. And I also want to say that I am not trying to paint an overly rosy picture with this. I think it's still going to be tremendously challenging this year in the capital markets, right? Even more so economically. People are probably going to lose some jobs because they're trying to get, when the inflationary, environment is here, having a low unemployment rate is actually kind of bad. So they're wanting to increase the unemployment rate. So people are probably going to lose some jobs this year. Home values are probably going to drop due to the continued increase in interest rates. And the U.S. hitting the debt ceiling could actually be very low, in my opinion, on the list of one's concerns. But the media is just going to latch onto it. They're going to stab, they're going to twist the knife, and they're going to fearmonger. That's what they do. They're just here to get clicks and likes, because a large percentage of all headlines out there, they're going to be negative in nature, because that's what gets you to click on it. That's what gets you to read it, right? And so they're just going to continue to beat this drum until June. But just know that that is not one of my concerns. It's been done too many times in the past without any real ramifications, that I'm not worried about the next time that it's going to happen either. And so hopefully this helps calm some of your fears, and you can just get back to living the retirement you deserve. So if you have any questions, reach out. 15-minute phone call is going to be there. And we can help you also have the confidence that you need in order to live the retirement you deserve. So thanks for tuning in, guys. Take care, and we'll be back here again probably next week or so.